Hello everyone and welcome to When Tomorrow Comes. This is Iceni's regular look at the world of planning and development. And this week we're doing a bit of a special on the budget 2021, which Rishi sort of presented yesterday. My name's Dan Jestico, I'm Director of Iceni Futures, and I'm joined by some of my Iceni colleagues to talk over yesterday's budget today. We've got Ian Anderson. How you doing, Ian?
Hello, thank you for letting me back.
That's right, good to see you. Yeah, plenty to talk about. We've got Matt Kinghan. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Dan.
Good to see you. And we've got When Tomorrow Comes regular Ashleigh Cook. How are you, Ashleigh?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, I'm good. Good to be back. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Good to have you back. So let's kick off with some headlines then. It was a short-term budget, wasn't it? I mean, there wasn't an awful lot in there apart from COVID recovery. Matt, what are your sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, and probably fair enough to, as we're in a kind of wartime conditions, as it were, and since we still are in that situation, Rishi's got to focus on the game in hand. So it's about the NHS and about COVID, and obviously the extension of the furlough scheme is a big part of that story, which is giving businesses a bit more certainty and chance to get geared up for the summer. The summer of parties is what I'm thinking of it as now, once we're all able to go out and about. So I think that's right, although there are interesting other elements of the budget on the side, which I think those who, in the property and development game will be, keen to learn more about as time goes forward.
That things like housing market stimulus.
Yeah, and I think a few weeks ago I was doing the Property Outlook 2021. There's a big question hanging over the end of the stamp duty holiday, which we've been looking at, and a lot of doom mongering about a sort of drop off in the transaction. I mean, we're now at the highest house prices on record as of last week, and we already were at the end of last year. So the stamp duty holiday is really working in a situation where otherwise it probably would be really in the gutter, because that's what happens when you go into recession. So it's working well. I mean, he's extending that out until June, and then it's September for the lower value properties. So that's going to keep things moving, which I think is really important.
Okay, good. What about freeports? Ian, tell us a bit more about them. What do they mean for the economy?
I haven't got a clue. That help? No, I mean, listen, we've watched it closely because we've as you know, Dan, we've got a lot of projects run along the Thames, particularly into South Essex. So we've been fortunate. We've been able to take some soundings from those involved with the Thames Freeport submission. I mean, from our perspective, and I kind of mentioned this in a LinkedIn tweet earlier. Seeing the word simplified and planning in one sentence is a rarity. So I have a fairly low wish list when it comes to planning and development. I would just like it to be easier to get sites away for planning permission and allocation, which we've not really seen the benefit of in South Essex because of the Greenbelt designation. So yes, there's the kind of the higher level points about making it attractive for businesses, not having to pay national insurance contributions, not having to pay business rates, which is obviously all headline grabbing stuff. I'll be interested to see what it actually means for us on the ground. Will it make it easier, frankly, for us to bring sites forward and get planning permission so we can get stuff built? We're going to be having a catch up with Perry Gladding in the next couple of weeks, who's he assists Kate Willard, the Thames Estuary Special Envoy. He chairs the Thurrock Business Board, Opportunity South Essex. He was very much involved in that process. So I'm hoping we'll get more information from him. Okay,
Ian, you've been replaced by some text, it seems.
I've been replaced by a phone call coming in. Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. Ashleigh, over to you. I mean, what are your sort of thoughts on what the Chancellor might be able to do in the sort of longer term to support planning and development?
Yeah, I think longer term, one of the interesting things that's come out of it is the levelling up fund. I think my take on that is that it's to do with sort of investment in local infrastructure that's needed to kind of improve towns and cities and really bring them the sort of facilities and infrastructure they've been needing for a long time. And I think it's something it's a new initiative. There's a lot of funding going into it. It'll be interesting to see kind of what areas benefit from this in the long term. I think that it's just they've just published the prospectus on it, so there'll be a sort of round of funding going forward, and then they'll choose where the funding goes to. But I think that has the potential to offer up some local areas a real chance to kind of make some significant improvements to their towns and cities, which I think we can all agree they are really needing, after what we've all been through the past year. So I think that'll definitely be interesting. Obviously, there was the announcement around the towns fund and the list of towns that were allocated that funding as well. Yet to see sort of how far that will go and what difference that will make to these places. But that's definitely one to watch to see if it does have any positive benefits as well. So yeah.
That's a really good point, because to me that was one of the real sort of highlights and interesting bits of news to come out of yesterday's budget. Matt, what sort of projects could this give me some examples of some types of projects that this money could go on for towns? Let's spark some imagination and get some debate going about where we can spend the cash.
Yeah, we've had the towns fund and the Future High Streets fund. So now we've got this sort of this levelling up fund. So it's kind of a carrying on the same thing. At the moment, the prospectus says it's either up to £20 million per scheme, small transport schemes, town centre, high street funding, or culture and heritage. So it sounds to me like proper town centre regen type of stuff, which is good. It could, I don't know, it could be acquiring old stock that needs to be under a sort of CPO position, or bringing together old units, funding for new business startup space. I think with such uncertainty and the high street outlook, both in sort of retail and offices, and we've got Class C as well to deal with. So a big change in how planning's dealt with on the high street. It's good to have a pot of money that authorities can draw on to keep thinking about the future.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because it's really interesting to see how this feeds into the post-pandemic reconstruction of our high streets and our retail and our leisure industry. Obviously we had quite a lot of support for business and sort of the leisure industry in the budget. But how does the sort of leisure industry come out of the pandemic in a way that they can lead on the front foot rather than just trying to survive? Is this cash going to help them, Ian?
One thing I was just going to say, one thing I thought was interesting. Obviously, we've had the whole change from the previous use class order to use class E, and there are certain uses that were removed from that. I think like pubs, cinemas, theatres, all they were removed and sort of considered differently to your standard town centre uses. And one thing that's come out of this, there's the community ownership fund as well, which has been announced, which actually focuses on those other uses. So they're those uses that previously, are kind of at risk of being lost, and they are acknowledging that they are something that has a lot of value to town centres in terms of the culture that they bring, in terms of the community relations that they can foster as well. So I thought that was interesting that they've specifically picked up and allocated an area of funding just to those uses that's very separate from, a lot of those standard town centre uses that probably the towns fund and the levelling up fund will help to support.
Yeah, in a way, Ashley's kind of stolen my thunder there, because the grants are great, but grants don't bring imagination. And I know this is a conversation principally about the budget, but there's that. I think there's that sense for those of us working on town centre projects that most people have grasped what the problem is, but there's still obviously a long way to go for people to work out what the solution is. Your question was specific to leisure, Dan, but I think you could probably bring that across a multitude of uses. It's easy for people to talk about town centres need to be more experiential. Okay, great. Well, what's it mean? So your point, leisure. What's it mean? And yet, what you really need, I think, is to create a platform that allows entrepreneurs and innovators to have that space to have a go and not be afraid to perhaps get a bit wrong before they get it right. And so inevitably, when we look at any budget or any series of government initiatives, there's the headline policy and then there's the bureaucracy that sits behind it. How much will the red tape stifle innovation and change, or will it give freedom? Will it take the shackles off and allow those local groups, such as Ashleigh just mentioned, to come forward and actually deliver those localised improvements, which then create that sense of place that's not just a homogenised version of the next town centre, which, let's face it, as consultants, we're probably all guilty of falling into the trap of if we're not careful.
Yeah, okay. And do sort of, and I know this again is straying away from the main point, but do sort of local authorities need more power to be able to sort of foster these innovative and entrepreneurial ideas in their town centres? Do we need to see more devolution to get power in the hands of local communities to support these sort of enterprises?
I guess one thing on Ian's point there is about business rates. I think there's been a hope to see a bit of an overhaul of business rates, and that hasn't really happened yet. And you know, for the small business, that's a big battle, I think, and for high streets generally, how they're going to continue to operate in a different market without that. I mean, the Class C has opened things up, I think, for the business owner. I think it's probably more problematic for authorities who are used to having a level of control, and I mean, that combined with permitted development rights does allow for a bit of a market free fall in town centres, but I think there'll be a case of sort of unintended consequences, but no one's quite sure what they're going to be yet. And you know, we might end up with some not very good residential, but we could also end up with, I think we're all hoping for some innovation, and probably no one's quite exactly sure what it is yet. I mean, I think on Oxford Street, you know, we might get some amazing experiential stores where big businesses got the money to spend on really exciting stuff, but in the smaller kind of regional towns where the vacancies are kind of climbing, that is going to be much more difficult, I think, to really shake things up.
Yeah, and I think in those areas, Matt, the risk is that, and I don't knock landowners and, you know, asset managers for feeling the need to do this, but I guess there's that tendency of looking for the way out as opposed to looking for the way forward. And you can understand that if you've been stifled with your your rental income because you've had tenants go and bust. But I think that's the challenge. You're trying to create that flexibility, but you're looking for long-term solutions as opposed to sort of just short-term way out.
And do you think there's going to be a review of the business rates policy in the longer term? I mean, you know, we're coming full circle now, and as I said at the start, this was a short-term budget. Do we think there is going to be that longer-term review of how business rates work?
I think it will depend on how things are in 6 to 9 months' time, possibly, you know, where, you know, I mean, I think they will talk about the summer of parties, and, you know, I think it's very hard to predict what the summer's going to be like. And I think there'll be a lot of people who want to get back out there and just enjoy themselves and spend a bit of money and kind of get back on the high street and down the pub in particular and get hospitality moving. And it'll be a UK staycation year as well. There's a lot of uncertainty about international travel, so that is going to be good. It's going to be good for, you know, that both people staying at home or wanting to holiday in the UK. So I think we'll see some bounce back, but I guess as the year progresses, we'll see what state the high street's really in, you know, and what further revising of the bureaucracy, as it were, is needed.
The problem with business rates, Dan, as you know, is that everybody knows that it needs to be reformed, but it still brings an awful lot of money to the exchequer. You know, and it's a tough call from a centralised finance perspective to decide when you're going to change it, because when you do, you've just created another black hole. You might, over the long term, it may then improve it, but it doesn't help if you're in a election cycle and you know that you've got the leader of the opposition waiting to pounce if you get it wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you can almost sense the reluctance to sort of grasp the nettle, can't you? All right.
We have seen a bit of a move on corporation tax, so there's a nice gentle lead into that, and it's only at the kind of at the big level, but because it's a short-term budget, the money will need to start to come from somewhere. In another year or two's time, with the debt ratio as high as it is, so yeah, a big, as you say, it's a pot of money from business rates.
Yeah, are you saying that the £15 billion of green investment bonds won't cover that? Sorry.
Well, you might have a point.
That was just a little bit of a dig at the lack of any sort of environmental commitments from Mr. Sunak yesterday. Okay, gents, I think we'll leave it there. Personally, I'm looking forward to the summer parties. Yeah, I'd like to thank you all very much for your contributions, Ian, Matt, and Ashleigh.
No problem. See you later.
Thanks,
See you
Dan.
next time.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.